Good afternoon, and welcome to the Bob Woodruff Foundation's webinar, Spot the Signs, Recognizing and Responding to Fraud and Scams. I'm pleased to see so many joining us today. I'm Hunter Russ. I'm the director of the Got Your Six Network at the Bob Woodruff Foundation. I welcome everyone joining the call today, and I look forward to hearing from our panelists. This is a Got Your Six Network webinar from the Bob Woodruff Foundation. The network connects more than 400 organizations supporting veterans, service members, and their families so we can learn from each other, see what's working in communities, and coordinate better. The goal is simple: help the people we serve reach quality support faster and help you accomplish your missions more effectively. Today's topic, recognizing and responding to fraud and scams, is important because according to consumer complaints filed with the Federal Trade Commission, active duty service members, National Guard personnel, veterans, and their families lost nearly 25% more money to scammers in 2024 compared to civilians, with reported losses totaling over $584 million. As technology advances, scammers are constantly changing tactics in how they are approaching veterans, service members, and their families. Our presentation centers on knowing and understanding and protecting yourself and your family from common fraud and scams. I'm excited to introduce our presenter for today. Carrie Foran Sepulveda serves as the Vice President of Security Strategy at Navy Federal Credit Union, where she leads strategic direction for fraud and physical security with Navy Federal's nearly 15 million members. Her team is pivotal in making decisions related to technology, operations, investments, and to protect against a diverse range of threats. Thank you so much for joining us, Carrie.
Thank you so much for having me. It's nice to meet you all. So I'm Carrie Foran Sepulveda. As Hunter said, I've been at Navy Federal for about 14 years now. And if you didn't guess from the P3 behind me, I myself am the child of military parents. So my mom was in the Marine Corps. My dad was in the Navy. I know, a somewhat unexpected combination, but they met doing ROTC at college together. And so a lifetime of military experience. And so for me, it's been a really wonderful fit to be here at Navy Federal and use all the different tools and opportunities that we have to serve our members in their financial needs to really support our military community. So I know today that we've got a lot of folks, I think many of you might represent organizations. So usually my webinars are geared towards the individual consumer. So I'll try to make sure it translates well to help you all understand how you might support your clients. But like Hunter said, if you put something in the Q&A, happy to adjust and make sure I'm giving you the information that you need to make to be the most impactful. So we can go ahead and get started. Protecting yourself from fraud, probably should say fraud and scams. But when I think about this topic, I really think at the end of the day, and it always sounds a little bit dramatic, right? This is a type of crime that exists. And so what we're really here to do is to think about what is it that we can do for ourselves and others in our lives to make sure that we are protected from this kind of crime and are able to hopefully as a community keep pushing back against it so that there can just be less and less of this type of crime. So I'm going to go over a couple different areas. So next slide. I'll cover some of our common scams that we see out in the world, scammers' techniques, some red flags for you to look for, preventative actions, and then a little bit about what to do if you do experience fraud and how that might be managed. So from there we can go. I want to talk about a few trends. In my experience, the best thing you can do is know ahead of time that a type of scam is out there because the stories are always going to be new and different, but staying up to date, we provide a lot of information on our blog, which is called Making Sense. That's our financial education blog. We always try to keep the most recent scams up there. I'll walk through some for us today. But the best thing to know is that it's there because when you get that text that it's always going to be a new twist on the same idea, but it's always going to be looking to have something that inspires urgency, something that puts you on the back foot, that makes you believe it for just a second. And once they get that hook in, try to use that to persuade you to send your money. So there's many, many different ways that this takes place. I'm sure, like raise your hand virtually if you've had a scam text in like the last week, right? Someone's trying to hire you for that job. Someone's got an unpaid tolls. I feel like we all figured that one out. They stopped doing the toll road thing so often. I got a pretty funny one with a little thing. A judge in Florida was really out to get me, right? Like you just get all of these things all the time. And when you're getting them as a text and they're kind of out of nowhere, it can be really easy to ignore them because they don't seem that real. But if the exact phrasing is right, they catch you at the wrong moment, maybe they get you on the phone, or maybe they've compromised your account somewhere else. So they have a little bit more fact to share with you to get their hooks in. Those are all ways that anybody, regardless of age, education, intelligence, money, anything, everybody can potentially become a victim of a scam because they're just people who are out there, these criminals, this is their job. And they're doing this 24/7 trying to steal money, and just appreciating how persistent they are in this goal. And then oftentimes what you're up against and truly the level of organization, especially when we talk about scams. There's a term, we try not to use it too much, but you might have heard about pig butchering, but it's this idea that they're really trying to build people up to steal all of their money. And a lot of that is actually fully led by organized crime. So when you're imagining that it's just some other person in their house by themselves trying to scam you, it's not that, right? It can be scam compounds fueled by human trafficking, right? The scale and deliberateness of this crime is more vast than most people really appreciate. So as we go through these, just remember that all of these are things that are being facilitated by, unfortunately, very sophisticated actors. So let's go ahead and we can actually jump to slide 4, and we'll talk about the imposter scam. So the imposter scam can take many different flavors, but often the scammer is going to pretend to be someone you know and trust. So a government agency, law enforcement, your bank or credit union, a company you might do business with, charities, or friends and family. I think for this audience in particular, I always like to make sure that we really emphasize those charities as well. I know that the military community is a very generous community, right? Lots of people watching out for one another, doing their best to be generous and support one another. But it can also be another vector where you're saying, oh, like, believe us, like, believe that this is really happening, and really kind of those things that make you feel good about how am I involved in this charity? How am I giving back? It can be very positive, but it's also something that could put you on your back foot. But essentially, what happens in an imposter scam, the scammers are going to pretend to be somebody. And then once they're able to get that hook in to convince you that that's who they are, they're going to try to get you to move money. So I will say it is a huge problem for financial institutions. We have a lot of different people who try to, they'll spoof our phone numbers. So they'll fake our phone number. So it'll look like it's actually coming from your bank or credit union. And then they'll say, oh, there's actually been wrong money's been put into your account. You really need to move it somewhere else, and they'll go from there. I'll get into a few more sort of specific flavors of it, actually, if we skip to the next slide. So I forgot I had IRS first. So I guess we're out of the heat of tax season now, but I'm sure many of you are still having flashbacks to whatever late night time you spent on your computer trying to get those taxes filed on time. So this is one where we see, I think we all know, like, the IRS is something that's pretty serious. You know, we're all out there each year filing our taxes, trying to make sure we get it right, trying to make sure we don't pay too much, trying not to make sure we don't pay enough, all those things, and that it's can feel like a really high stakes situation. And so when they do the IRS imposter scam, they're using that kind of fear I think many of us have, like, what if I did make a mistake? What if I did forget to file that form? It's easy to make a mistake. How would I know? And so when you kind of get these claims, and they come attached with the threats. So that's always kind of the 1-2 punch, right? The, hey, this is this big scary thing that I know the real version of this does have real life consequences. So I'm going to threaten that that's true. And then they're coming in to sort of really up the urgency by saying, you're going to be arrested. There's going to be fines. This is actively getting worse, and you need to do something right now to stop it. And that's where they kind of get that momentum where, I guess I could have messed up my taxes. Oh my gosh, am I going to jail? And then people go to, my spouse is deployed. I can't go to jail right now. Like, I don't want to go to jail ever, but this is really a bad time. This is actively getting worse. This is more money than I have. I can't solve this problem. And it immediately puts people into an emotional space where they stop making logical decisions that if they knew ahead of time what was going down, they would say, this doesn't make any sense. I'm comfortable not doing something while I give myself time to figure this out. But instead, they're doing it under duress with this sense of urgency, with all of the fear pumping through them that they're really about to screw up their whole lives if they don't get this right. And it's that vulnerability that the scammers are able to create in the moment that then when they say the next thing, which obviously all of us sitting here listening to me today in a normal situation, you're not thinking, if I said, wow, I'm the US government, I think you should send me some prepaid gift cards to fix that financial issue. Obviously, you're thinking, yeah, I don't think I would pay the government with like prepaid Cash App cards. I'm not going to cash out the federal government. I'm not going to do a cashier's check and then just mail it off to some address that's not a US Treasury address. All these things that just aren't quite right. But if you're truly in that state where you're really thinking about the fear of the situation, it's easy to forget that those seem just a little bit off. So for the IRS, again, we're moving out of tax season, so hopefully that means a little bit fewer out there in the world. They really concentrate that activity in April, but you'll see it throughout the year. And just knowing that the IRS is not going to email or text you about your taxes, right? You might get that automated, like they've been filed version, but if there's a real problem with your taxes, you're going to get a paper letter. Also, whatever is going wrong with the IRS, there is nothing that can't be solved with a few more hours of thinking, right? It's just not that urgent that if there's something wrong, it's just not going to happen that way. So kind of keeping your wits about you. And if you're working with clients, sort of saying, hey, like I know something like this can seem really scary, especially if maybe maybe you have made a mistake on your taxes before, or maybe you're pretty sure you did something wrong. You might feel very vulnerable to this, but if you owe back taxes, you're going to work with the federal government, right? You're going to do this through US mail, kind of doing it properly. And it's not going to be these things where nothing, you're going to jail if you don't get a gift card in the middle of the night at Walmart. That's just not how it actually works with the federal government. So keeping that idea in mind that there are people who are going to come out here and threaten you with things that sound very scary. But they're kind of all an illusion. And we talk about in the scam world, breaking the spell, right? If the scammers are able to persuade you and cast that spell over you, you are operating all of a sudden in sort of this parallel reality. And then what does it take for you to say, this doesn't feel right? Like I'm not in an action movie. This is not what's happening. I need to take a pause. So that's kind of the high and low on the IRS imposter scam. On the next slide, I mentioned a little bit already, but the banking imposter scam, this is one we see a lot where you've got somebody pretending to be your financial institution. Obviously, lots of scams come at all different ways to try to get to your money. Banking imposter is kind of going straight in. They are pretending there is a problem with the money you have and that you need to fix it right away. So sometimes these ones are very interesting because they come with a combination of an account takeover, so a type of fraud, right? They're actually breaking into your account. So maybe your email's been compromised. They were able to get in. You use the same username and password on a bunch of websites, all sorts of different things. But somehow they're able to get into your financial institution. And then they're able to say very specific things from that to persuade you it really is your financial institution. So that could be something like, did you recently make transactions at whatever merchant? And if the answer is no, you're already gonna be thinking, well, yeah, sometimes if there is fraud on my account, I do need to have a two-way conversation with my financial institution. My best advice from this one is just to hang up. I give my own personal example about, I think it was 2 summers ago, I had my wallet stolen. I was out to dinner with friends, had a perfectly normal time, drove home, went to sleep, didn't think anything of it. And I woke up to my phone ringing and it said Navy Federal Credit Union. And when I answered it, it said there's been fraudulent activity on your account. But at this point, I didn't have my whole purse stolen. It was just my wallet out of my purse. So I had driven home as normal. And as far as I knew, my cards were in my possession. So I didn't know what kind of fraud we'd be talking about. And because I had just woken up, again, I'm working in the fraud department at Navy Federal Credit Union, and I hang up on us because I say, I am not awake enough yet to do this. And I can already tell I'm making decisions under like, is there fraud? Do I need to deal with this? But saying, I'm not sure if this is even true or not. So I hung up, I opened my app, I froze my cards, and I could actually see already in the app, then I could see the charges. I could see it was like a Target and a Walmart, and I was like, and a CVS. And I was like, okay, sounds like this probably actually was Navy Federal. So I guess I'll have to call back my own teammates. But I went downstairs and I saw my wallet was missing. And I was able to kind of figure out, okay, I must have gotten stolen last night. So then we always say, call the number on the back of your card. Obviously, at this point, I did not have my cards. And I may know the main line for Navy Federal by heart, but so if I were you, put myself in your shoes, I go on our website, take a look at our official mainline number to call in and work through the process. And we never mind. And I guarantee you, if you rank anywhere else, or it's an insurance or any other institution, we do not mind if you say, I'm sorry, I'm really uncomfortable. I need to call you right back. We understand, and we would far rather have somebody hang up on us and call us back and work through the process than have you assume it's real even when you're starting to think, is something right? I'm not sure if this is true or not. And then you end up losing money to a scammer. So my best advice for this one is just know that sometimes they're just guessing, right? Like I could call Hunter tomorrow and say, hey, Hunter, have you been shopping at, I don't know, Dick's Sporting Goods? But pick your random store. And you say, absolutely not. I haven't, right? If I'm just picking a random retailer, there's a pretty good chance you haven't been shopping there. I could just be completely full of it. Or maybe it actually is a situation where the fraudster has already compromised your account, and then they're trying to use that account compromise to trick you into moving a bunch of money. So it can happen either way, but just kind of keeping in mind that just because they seem to know something about your accounts, maybe they do, maybe they don't, maybe they're getting lucky, maybe they can actually see transactions. Either way, hang up, call in directly. But especially just know, like, we're never going to call you and ask for your login information ever. And I guarantee you, and if you have a financial institution that's calling you and asking you for your login information, I recommend you change financial institutions. This is not a sales pitch, but no one of any normal caliber thinks that that is a normal practice. They're not going to call you and ask for that information. Any reputable financial institution, our member service representatives cannot see your password. They should never be able to see your password. So this is information that all only should happen digitally, and it should never be something that you're talking about. Same thing for a one-time passcode, unless you already know you contacted your financial institution and they're saying, I need to verify your identity. I'm going to send you a code now and read it back. But if you aren't the one who called them, end the conversation, call back in a main number and figure out whatever transaction you're trying to do, but start from the beginning. Those ones that are those one-time passcodes, they should not be being asked for by anybody. I think we're trying to, as a industry and as a global and sort of commerce in general, trying to move past using that tool because it is a little bit fraught, but just know that that is a still sometimes a vulnerability. All right, I'll pause there. Any questions on either of those two? All right. I've got two more that I want to, oh, sorry, three more. Scrolled too far. No, I'm here. I'm at reminders. There you go. All right. So reminders. Okay. Don't give out your personal information if you did not initiate the contact. The government's not going to call, text, email you asking for personal information. Right? You might get a notification for sure. And I know that our federal agencies are moving towards more online things. So there are secure online portals that you might be using to interact with the IRS for Social Security. Those things exist. But again, you're trying to go in the front door. In that case, you're looking for that .gov. If it's Navy Federal, you're looking for NavyFederal.org, right? You're going through the front door to make sure you're communicating securely with these people. Again, no one's going to ask you to pay them with gift cards, debit cards, all these very specific things. It's actually kind of hit a peak of this idea of like, oh, you'll fix it by putting money into a crypto ATM. A whole bunch of crypto ATMs are getting shut down because it turned out it was mostly fraud. There's so little actual valid transactions going through them that the whole crypto ATM thing may in fact be going away. I know at the Costco in my neighborhood, we had one show up and then people, I'm not even sure if it was employees or not, put a bunch of signs and be like, this is a scam, don't do it. The federal government does not need you to pay them through here. And it was all these pieces of paper that people kept taping to it, and then it disappeared in like a week. So I think that might have peaked already because it was such an obviously misused channel. But normal real institutions will use normal methods of payment. They will use ACH. You can always log back in. Things do not hit this fever pitch emergency. And just make sure, one last one I have on here is don't give your device to unexpected people. So for example, kind of going back to something I mentioned before, right? I'm very aware the military community is very generous, right? Is the group of people who care deeply about our country, about each other. And so that generosity that can inspire. So the way that we've seen this play out is someone is at the gas station. They say, hey, I don't have any money for gas. Do you have $10? And you say, it's 2026. I don't have any cash. And they're like, well, could you just transfer me the money? And there's nothing wrong with being willing to give somebody some money. But where we lose control and where we have problems when you say, all right, here, take my phone and transfer it yourself. You type in your own Cash App handle. You type in your own Venmo handle. And when you hand that unlocked device authenticated into your banking account, all those ways that we and every other financial institution are making it easy for you to move your money when it's you doing that. Keep in mind that what is happening now is you are on your own device. Well, it's them, but you're in the same place physically. Your device, you use your Face ID probably or your passcode on your own setting. So you're doing all of your normal ways of you logging in. You are authorizing that. And then you just gave them full access, right? This is the equivalent of instead of taking $10 out of your wallet and handing it to somebody, you handed them your whole purse and just said, go ahead and take $10 out. And I know you would never do it with that physical version of the event. So when you think about the digital version of events, giving somebody your fully unlocked phone, be really smart. If you want to be generous in that way, that's totally fine. I would say if it's up your alley to be that generous with people you meet, no problem. I would just carry cash. I would just not even entertain the idea that you're going to hand over your phone to anybody because it truly is, right? It can be your car keys, your entire bank account, all of your personal information. What if they don't give it back? So even if that person seems trustworthy, you can be willing to lose the $10. Maybe they don't use it for anything good, but just really think about what that means to give somebody full access to your device and how you're going to feel if that interaction goes south, right? They don't want to give it back. They're obviously taking too long. Some of this money can be moved in ways that will absolutely try to help you get it back. But like if they move a wire or they do some other things, like some of these things are one way, the Zelle, that is irrevocable. Once it's gone, it's gone. So just keeping in mind for yourself that those are things you really want to be on guard about. Okay, now we're going to move into a few other kinds of scams. So this one is a social media scam. So this can be a couple different versions. Often this falls into the category of the more general romance scam. But there's a few different versions. But essentially, the scammer starts an online relationship. They hide their true identity and they try to build trust quickly to get a connection. Once they have that trust, they're going to ask for money. They're going to come up with all sorts of really good sounding reasons why they need it. They want to come and visit you in person, right? Oh my gosh, can you believe it? They've been so sick and they can't pay for a doctor. They have other travel expenses. There's a financial crisis, all of these things. And then again, you may see this not just that those things maybe are already tingling your spidey senses that something's not quite right, but they also might ask for these things: wire transfers, crypto payment, gift card payment, places where you're seeing that somebody is clearly trying to have a less traceable, irrevocable way of getting this money so that it's theirs and they're off without it and no way for you to get it back and no way for your financial institution to get it back. So for these things, I would say a lot of my advice here is when I really kind of put on my, like, what if I were to give somebody just general life advice? But it's 2026. As I always say, I've been to a lot of weddings where the couple met online. It's not like it's reasonable to say you should never meet somebody online. You should not talk to strangers on the internet. Like, it's 2026. We all talk to strangers on the internet. That's kind of how it goes sometimes. And that's fine. There's nothing wrong with it. It's all just about playing it safe and making sure you understand what risks you're taking. I would really encourage you, especially if somebody's in the online dating realm in particular, because the romance scams really are the places where we see just some really tragic things. Because it's not only is it the relationship, it's that oftentimes the damage to the person's emotional sense of self, their self-confidence, their self-worth. That's not, I mean, the money can be catastrophic in and of itself, but it adds on this layer of it being very hard to ask for help. There's a lot of shame. And so this is one where I'd say the more you can set yourself up for success before this happens, like before you engage with social media or dating apps and things like that, the more likely you are, like, just really try to stay on this problem. So the biggest things are: one, I'm sorry to say your celebrity crush is not falling in love with you. There's a ton of people on the internet pretending to be everybody's celebrity crush, and they're using that against you, right? I have a friend, her cousin really thought she was in love with Brendan Fraser and just fully believed it. She lost a ton of money, but she was on fan groups. She liked pictures. It was very easy for the scammers to watch her internet activity, know that she thought that he was a great actor, and then use some loneliness she was experiencing to then really get her into a place where quickly those hooks were in. And so then normal things like, why doesn't Brendan Fraser have, $1,000 to buy a plane ticket to come see you? Like, he's, pretty famous. He's been in a lot of stuff. You don't think he has any money at all? Like, why would you, this person who has very little money to her name, be the one to pay for his tickets? But once you're already so bought into this hope and the romance and the excitement of it, it can be very difficult to kind of wind that back. I've also seen where we had a member and she was, I have a tremendous respect for her. She understood that she had sent the money and that it was her financial loss to take, but she sent us everything. And she was sending it to law enforcement and anybody that she thought might be able to help, because she said, she understood at that point that she had been hoodwinked in this relationship. It wasn't real, but she wanted to say, like, how can I make sure this entity, whether it's, whoever this was, that wasn't actually my new boyfriend, how can I make sure that they can't do this to other people? And so in that, I think for me, it was really illuminating, because you could see, and again, this is a smart person. Once she had pulled together her artifacts to share with all us and regulators and law enforcement, everything, you're like, this is a smart woman. It's not, because again, I always want to say, like, intelligence is not what this is, right? She was lonely. She found somebody who they were messaging back and forth and seemingly to develop this really positive relationship. There was a few times when the scammer pushed and she clearly didn't feel good about it. And then you see that she sent all her text messages, right? So then there's all this traffic where she's sort of like, I don't feel good about this. He completely backs off about money. Everything is back to just about how much they like each other, their interests, what they care about, back to just relationship. And then he would try again. And so it was sort of this like months and months long process where every time he pushed, if she got nervous, he'd wait until eventually she got a little bit more susceptible. But when you see this cat and mouse play out over months, I think it gave me personally a really deep appreciation for like, this isn't like someone just sent you a message and be like, hello, I am your celebrity crush and I'm in love with you. Please send me $10,000. That's easy to ignore. If you've been getting a few messages back and forth over time, building trust, and they wait until they think they've got that level of trust to convince you that maybe there is a set of circumstances where it's reasonable that you would be paying for that for somebody. So those kinds of things of, again, just really as you go out into, or your clients, or whomever, as you go out into sort of that online dating world, thinking through really clearly what makes sense and what doesn't make sense. I think being a little bit cold-hearted of like, if you just started dating somebody online and they immediately have a financial emergency, there's a chance that's true, right? Economy is tough for a lot of people. It's not to say that that couldn't be a real person who really is starting to build a relationship with you and does legitimately have medical debt or a financial emergency. Of course, those things are possible. But I think knowing just how common and how frequently we see these scams will let people know that it's probably better to just assume that it's a scam. Because if it's so much worse if it is. If it was just somebody you were just talking to online for a few days and you didn't help them with their problem, they're going to go and continue to find another way to solve their problem. But the likelihood that it's not really that real person, it's not really real life, is so high. And again, I think it's not just the financial losses, which can be catastrophic, but also the emotional side. When I think about sort of maybe stuff that might be more specific to the military community, we certainly also see like the deployed soldier is a very classic one. And somehow the deployed soldier needs your help to pay for their flight home, which I would say no, no, they do not. We do not have our service members deploy and then just leave them where they are. They're brought back. So things like that, where they're trying to see if they can tap into your empathy around the situation or why things might be hard in the military. Those are particularly vulnerable ones because it provides such a clear cover for why they're not available. Hey, how come you can only talk to me sometimes? How come I hear from you like a ton for a couple of days and then I don't hear from you at all? What's going on? Anything that's kind of erratic and in a relationship where everybody's a civilian and living in the US and has normal access to their phone and the internet, you would definitely feel like something was wrong, but the cover story allows for this behavior to feel like it makes sense. So I would sort of say for this one, my best advice is to back up and just say, at the end of the day, if you're going to date online, if you're meeting people online, make sure you have your real life friends and family. Like who do you trust today that you could say, hey, I want to run it by you. And if you tell me this seems like a scammer, I'm going to trust you. No matter how much I'm feeling good about this new relationship I think I have, I'm going to believe you when you say, this sounds too good to be true. Or like, here's 5 other examples. Like, that look just like it on the internet of all of these scams, please, please, please be willing to hear that. And kind of just, I think for me at least, if I went into a situation knowing like, hey, there's like a 30% chance that this is not real, it'd be a lot easier to say goodbye to a relationship that seemed like it could be really positive, but is not real because I kind of knew already the odds that there was somebody fake in there were good. And I think that's easier psychologically to wrap your head around than it is to believe that everybody's real and then have to come to terms with the idea that they might not be after you've already had conversations. So those are my big ones. And then again, my general go to dating advice, if you've only known somebody for a couple of days, don't send your life savings to them no matter what their story is, whether they're real or not, probably not the person for you. Make sure you talk to people in your real life. And then if you do meet somebody online who does not live where you live, like before you form deep attachment, they should be able to FaceTime you. It's not that big of a commitment, right? The deep fakes are getting better. I feel like it's been kind of talked about in the media the last couple of years, but they really are getting better and cheaper and more accessible. So even that, I would say, like, even if they're FaceTiming you, all right, when are we going to meet in person? Do not form some big emotional attachment to somebody over months and keep letting the meeting in real life thing get kicked down the road. Like you just have to sort of say, if I'm going to invest my emotional energy in this, I need it to be real. I need to meet this person in real life. So those are my kind of, my dating tips, my best practices adjacent to scams. I'll pause there real fast for any questions. All good. Okay. So the next one, and this one actually happened in my family. So it was right around the time I started working at Navy Federal. I got a call from my grandmother in the middle of the day. And we're close, but she mostly emails me and we would call on a weekend, but it was very strange that she was calling me like mid-morning on a Tuesday. So of course I answered immediately because I assumed that somebody in my family has died. because that's pretty much the only reason I would get a midday work call from her. And when I went to answer the phone, she said, Carrie, I don't know what's going on, but I just got a call from a police officer in Boston, where my brother lives, that your brother was in a drunk driving accident, but he was the one who was driving and he hurt somebody badly and they don't know if they're going to make it. So imagine that situation, right? Like I've got my one brother, I've got my grandmother calling upset that there's a potential that like not that he's hurt, but that he just hurt somebody else potentially badly and basically ruined his life and somebody else's, right? Like you think about like that actual situation, like that is bad news on so many levels. It's complicated, it's very emotional. And it's one of those things that they use a situation like that is so shock to your system. Like, oh my gosh, my brother is apparently not in a good situation. Like I thought he was fine, but apparently he's drinking and driving now. And he's hurt, like that everything about this immediately puts you in a place that's designed to stop you from thinking and using your best judgment. But when she called and said that to me, I just sort of said, okay, let's take a pause. And she said, your grandfather, and he was in some pretty late stage Parkinson's at that point, but he did not feel good about this situation. He, even at that stage, he got some feeling that like something wasn't quite right. My brother is close with my parents. It'd be really weird for him to call our grandparents instead of our parents. It was weird that he didn't call himself. Like a few things just didn't feel quite right. So even my grandfather was like, I don't know. So she's like, what do you think? Like, do you think this is real? I tried to ask him what precinct he was calling from, and he couldn't answer. So my grandmother's enough of a New Englander to be like, I want to know which part of Boston allegedly this happened in. And this scammer didn't know Boston well enough. That's really how they got themselves caught. And so she's like, it just didn't quite make sense. And thank goodness, like the combination of, I was a little skeptical that my grandfather also didn't seem like it felt right. And then when she's like, I'm not sure, I don't know what to do, I just said, let's pause. Because even if the absolute worst thing has happened, that my brother is apparently off the rails, he's not, he's fine, that he's off the rails, drinking, hurting people, all of this, like life actually is that bad. And sometimes life is bad, right? I'm sure everybody's had hard times and experiences where sometimes you do get a terrible phone call. But that all of this stuff is true. Let's just pause. Even if it's true, even if he is in jail, guess what? He's probably staying in jail. So we have enough time to let me hang up and let me call him first. Like, let's just make sure this is real. So I hang up and I call my brother. And since my brother also is like, why is my sister calling me in the middle of a work day who's dead? He answers immediately, walks out of a meeting, also answers immediately. I'm like, hey. And he's like, what's up? And I was like, well, the fact that you're answering your own cell phone tells me that you are not in jail. You haven't killed anybody. Like, we're okay. And so I explained to him quickly, get off the phone, call my grandmother back. And she's relieved. We're fine. No, we were very lucky that they had their wits about them enough to not. But that is the situation where it's like something bad has happened. The emotional level is so big that you start wanting to solve this problem. How can I make bail? How can I help this problem as quickly as possible, right? So I would say that this family emergency one, that was hard. Again, that's probably like 13 years ago when this happened. Now add in the potential. Now you will still see scammers doing the version that it's just what I had described that happened to my family. But now AI is good enough that if they had, they found my brother doing a presentation or something else on the internet somewhere, they have his voice, they could have it be him calling my grandmother. And now it's Daniel's voice saying, Nana, I need help. Like now you've got a whole nother level of emotional volatility. You've got fewer signals that something isn't right because you can't rely on I didn't talk to him. It wasn't actually him who talked to me. He should have had his own phone call. He should have been able to, none of these things, some of these signals that even 10 years ago we would have had, some of those are starting to go away. So my best for this one is to kind of think about a couple key things. One, like even if things are very bad, you still oftentimes to hang up and call back or to have somebody else with you to call quickly, do it. Even if you have to say, I got to go and just hang up on whoever it is, because if it's really the police, you'll be able to reach them again. If it's really, whatever this emergency is, they will be able to call back if they're real, and give yourself that moment to call or text the person who's allegedly in crisis. It's very rare that they actually have access to that person's phone. Usually you're going to be able to call back their regular phone and it'll be them. The request for money and secrecy. Those are the other big ones. Those are some of the other clues that tipped my grandparents off, that it was like, we need money for bail, which, okay, that wasn't totally an unreasonable thing, but it was like, and please don't tell my parents. And my grandmother's thinking, he is smart enough to know that if you've committed a crime this serious, you're not going to be able to just avoid telling your parents that this happened. So the secrecy also didn't make sense because they're trying to isolate the victim, in this case, often a older relative, trying to isolate them so they're forced to feel like they need to make this decision by themselves, right? And even if my grandfather had just not been there and she'd been alone in her house without anybody to be a bit of a mirror to say, hold on, like, let's just take a pause. If you don't have anybody in the room with you, and the scammers are going to try so hard to stop you from hanging up. They're going to try to keep you on the phone, right? The real police, if you said, I feel really like this might be fake, I need to call your precinct. What precinct are you in? Don't take the phone number they give you, but you could call that precinct back and at. Like, there are ways to pump the brakes just a little bit. And then for this one, I actually the good thing about the family emergency scam is that there are some just really simple things that can help. So for example, we now have a family code word, right? We've used, hold on, my computer just closed. Hopefully you guys can still hear me. I can't see anything. Hunter, can you hear me? Okay. So we have this code word. Like, we also have used it. I'm sure many of you may have children and you've maybe used it to have like, hey, if a grown-up that you don't expect to pick you up, how would you know that I actually said it was okay? Like, what's our family code word? So we've had a code word for sort of our kids' safety. And we've also brought it out into having a family code word for a situation like this. If you got a call that something terrible had happened and it didn't feel right, what is that thing that I could tell you that's like, it's not easily replicable. It's not really, it's a total nonsense, right? You're not going to look up what town I'm from. It's not our childhood dog's name, right? Like, it's find something that if somebody combed your social media and your family's social media, they would never find this reference somewhere. So it can't be like, my husband loves Real Madrid. If our code word was Real Madrid, guess what? Somebody could probably guess that one. So you want to try like something really just off the wall, random, repeat it, talk about it on Thanksgiving. Don't talk about it in writing, but talk about it on the phone, in person, whatever. Like, have it be something that you all know and you talk about it enough that everyone's going to remember that even if they really did have a hard time, if something dramatic was actually happening, they would probably still be able to remember that term. But things like sometimes that one's kind of fun. There's so many things that have a lot of complex solutions. This one kind of has a real simple back to basics type solution. All right, so that's that one. And then I've got two more in this section. The next one is the job offer scam. And the job offer scam on slide 10. This one I wanted to highlight for this group because I know that when we're thinking about whether it's the service member themselves exiting military service or you're in a position where you're supporting military spouses, right? People need jobs and when in these moments of transitions. And often those moments of the transition include a little bit of financial stress. So it is very normal for people to be really looking for a job, to be a little bit vulnerable to whatever they see as an advertised job. And then lots of times these job scammers, they understand the military community well enough, right? You poke holes long enough, they're not going to get the details, right? Same thing about, didn't know the ins and out of Boston neighborhoods, but they're going to know enough to be able to understand, hey, oh, I bet you might be PCSing soon. Wouldn't it be helpful to have this full-time remote job? I know how hard it can be following your spouse around the country or the world. Here's how this job would be great for you, right? It's easy enough to learn that just basic high-level lingo to sound like they're part of the community to persuade you to trust them. And again, right, we talk about getting a job. Well, it's true. You do have to prove your identity and your ability to work in the United States to get a real job. You do have to provide your bank account information so that they can send you a paycheck if you have a real job. Like, they're taking advantage of all those pieces of connections and trust that you have to have with a legitimate employer, and trying to find a way to say, oh, like, it's just what you need. Good salary, flexible, remote, all these things that if you're, again, a military personnel transitioning out of active duty and you're ready to take on that first civilian job, right? You might not have had a civilian job since you were flipping burgers as a kid. Like, it can be a really different space to play, and how jobs are advertised now might feel very different than what you experienced in the past, depending on how long you've been active duty. And again, if you're a spouse, you may have been in that space of having to change jobs a lot. So it might be those things that, there are real jobs that would support a military spouse, but there is also sort of a known vulnerability in our group. So big things to do. Make sure that if you are contacted, make sure that you're going, again, back to the top. Is there a legitimate website? Where do they say this company exists? Okay, now go look on that county's website and see if there's a business license. Maybe they're offering you a remote position, but do they have any physical locations? What are some of those things that you can do? We always say, always try to go in the front door. So figure out what this really should look like. And again, if it's some crazy small company nobody's ever heard of, yeah, there's a chance it's somebody with a brand new company with a brand new idea, and maybe there is a job there, but there's like a really good chance that it's not real. So just like the dating thing, maybe the love of your life you've just met, and they really do just have a medical emergency and need a bunch of money right after you've met. Maybe, but there's like a lot more people out there lying and scamming you about that than that really happening. So the job ones, again, make sure you call through a legitimate number that you research through the front of the internet, looking to see where that business is registered, see what you can find from official government filings. And then I would make sure that you don't give out your social security or anything up front. Another one that can kind of be a adjacent one for this one is, all right, so maybe they're not even going to steal your identity. They're just giving you this job. Then they're going to say, oh my gosh, Hunter, you are a perfect fit for this job. We are delighted to have you on board. I'm going to send you a check since this is work from home. You know what we care about? We care about the ergonomic chair. We want you to have everything you need in your work from home setting. So I'm going to give you $5,000 to get yourself set up. Okay? You give them your bank account information. Lo and behold, 10 grand shows up and they go, oh my gosh, we accidentally sent you a double payment. Could you send $5,000 of that back? And you say, yeah, I can. I only ever expected 5. You sent 10. Of course, I'll send it back. Who do I send it to? And it's, a shady cash app, but you're so excited about the job and they've already sent you this money. So aren't they trustworthy, right? You gave them their bank account, the money came to you, and then you send it back. Well, guess what? All of those initial deposits are not going to clear. They're going to get pulled back. So you're going to lose all of that money is going to come out of your account because it was never real money to begin with. And now you've also sent them 5 grand of your own money. And so sometimes that's the whole scam. There's not even any big identity theft additional thing going on. They're just using this to basically get you to do a check fraud scam, just in the modern edition of it. So anyone where they're trying to send you money to set things up, or they're trying to get you to, oh, we overpaid. Can you send that back? Like those are not normal things to have happen. I would not do those things. And if they sent you the money, it would be better to just let it sit in an account and don't touch it for several months and let the dust settle. Certainly there's no urgency. If they oversent you money, if it was real, there's not a panic to do it. You're not going to write it to a cash app. You're going to only do it, you're going to work a process. You're going to talk to your bank. You're going to figure out how to handle it the right way. But that one is interesting because not only can it be the identity theft, a lot of times it's just this, check fraud, ACH fraud version where they're not trying to have an ongoing scam against you. They're just going to use it as a quick one-off transaction to try to get you to send money. All right, and we have about 15 minutes left, so I'll go real fast. The next one is check scams. This fake check scam, it can be the one I just described associated with a new job, right? Or they'll say, oh, they want you to be a secret shopper. Here's some money to be a secret shopper. Oh, no, we sent you too much. Can you send back some of it? The original funds were never real. They were always going to get pulled back out of your account once the banks reconciled everything. Or just the good old fashioned publishers clearinghouse. If some of us are of a certain age and we understand that you still like Ed McMahon at your house with a big check, right? There was a real version of this sweepstakes, but now it's a lot of fake checks in the mail. And unfortunately, we do get members who try to sign them and send them in. Some of them, I'm not sure if they're really being truthful. They thought it was real, but some of them are older folks who maybe they do. They remember when this was a real thing. They really thought that they won. And they thought they were getting $1 million, but they're not. And so those are all just making sure checks in particular, keep in mind, right? It's on you to make sure any check that you're cashing is legitimate, right? So you as the consumer, and I know that can be tough, especially if anybody is working in a situation where you're receiving checks from maybe clients or customers or something where you're in a position where you might be receiving checks, like really make sure those checks are real. Do not move money that was from a check right away. Like hold on, like don't do anything where you're going to need to use that money right away. Give it a little bit of time to make sure that that check clears. Because if you end up using checks, trying to cash checks that aren't good, right, at some point you're going to lose access to your bank account because we're going to say, well, at some point you're involved in this. So making sure that you use your own good judgment so it doesn't have bigger impacts on you. All right, so you have it up, should be up on your screen now. I know I can see it on mine, but it's going to give you a little bit of a quiz here. So looking through, and you guys can answer these, and Hunter's going to help me out with making sure we know when people have responded. But you can take this quiz here to see if you learned a thing in the last 45 minutes or so. Dun, dun, dun. Is it showing up for everybody? D, all of the above. The next one's, what's the most common mode of communication for government agencies? And we had C, USPS, good old-fashioned mail. Again, there might be notifications and kind of other things that come up along the way, but the big things, like when you really screw up your taxes, there's a big issue. Those things they're going to come in mail or potentially through a secure inbox if you've opted into that, but that's going to be, deep in the VA's system. And after you've authorized, you'll have a login. It should all be part of a whole big process. It's not just going to come out of nowhere from a random phone number. And then the last question we had, you're less likely to fall victim to an impersonator scam if you are C, both A and B. So you want to be suspicious of those unexpected calls, texts, emails, social media requests, and never give out your personal or account information to someone you don't know. I mean, I would just say the best way to deal with all of this is to get it off of your inbox. If you have an iPhone, unfortunately, I don't have a Droid, so I don't know how it works. I do know they have a setting, but on iPhone, you can actually set it up now to have it screen your calls, and it'll be like, "Why are you calling?" So that one's kind of a funny one. I had it last week. My kid's doctor's office was calling, and I can hear the poor nurse trying to be like, "Well, who was that?" Like, it's me, like trying to talk through. I'm like, "Oh, sorry, answer." But it was a different number than they'd used before. So it might catch a few things, but you can easily see what they're doing. And it's so much easier to read what it was, right? That was an expected call from a healthcare provider. And so I see a number I don't know, but then I can see who it's from and I can read it. And I think for me, at least, the difference between reading what this is and does it seem shady when I'm just reading it compared to if somebody already has me on the phone and it's already trying to convince me of something, it's a little bit easier. And then I think everybody probably has figured it out by now because it's been around a little bit longer, but it's very easy to have texts you don't know sent to other inboxes, right? So I would just encourage you, whether you have an Apple or a Droid or whatever else, both of those are working hard to have systems to just never see this in the first place, right? If you just never see it, it's not going to be a problem. That's the best way to do it. I think, especially if there's anybody in your life who you think is vulnerable to these things, those are ways that even if you can't be with them all the time, you can set up these tools to make sure stuff is getting out of their face and that they're only seeing those calls from numbers they already have. They're seeing texts from people they know, and it's just going to help them separate. Much less annoying. It was like when caller ID first came out, we actually could all use it effectively to screen phone calls. It just makes your life a lot cleaner and eliminates that risk. Okay. We only have about 10 minutes left, so I don't know, Hunter, if we wanted to pivot to our Q&A or if we wanted to go through. I have a few more things about protecting your information and fraud response.
Yeah, we can go through if you want to save about 5 minutes at the end, and then we can wrap up.
Okay, great. Let's head to, I'm gonna fast forward just a little bit just to help everybody out here, make sure we get to some of the other things I want you to know. If you go ahead to slide 20. So protecting your information. So here's the big ones. Hold on.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
There we go. All right. So use a password manager. Here's what I'll say. It's super annoying. When you set it up, it takes a long time. It's a real pain. And you have to do a lot of work to make this work. But once it's done, you are in a far better place. So I would say this one, like any problem, right? Think about, how do I actually want to attack it? And you're welcome. I've done that for you. When I thought about, oh my gosh, how many different websites have I shopped at over the years? How many different usernames and passwords do I have for everything that I do, my kids do, my family, all the different things? So many. And so basically what I said and what I would advise is start with the most high risk. So use that password manager and have fully unique, very secure passwords. I would start with your email, because your email can be a way that people can reset passwords and break into your all sorts of accounts. So make sure that email password, hard to crack, only for that one thing, like never, ever, ever anything else. Set up on your email. There'll be things to let you know if there was a login from a new location. Turn in everything you can, like lock down that email the best you possibly can. After that, I would say banking, insurance, any government organizations you might be doing business with. Those are kind of my top ones. And then social media too, because social media can be sort of another way that people can reroute back into stuff. But that's what I sort of did. I sort of started with the beginning, made sure my email was secure, made sure all my financial logins were totally unique, totally secure, saved to my password manager. And then I just kind of did that as a New Year's resolution one year. And then I just spent the rest of the year, like whenever I went back and I found myself shopping, wherever it is, Old Navy, Walmart, wherever you're going as you go through life, when you have a moment, take the chance, reset it, get it onto your password manager. Because now when you get as we all inevitably do, hey, guess what? Bad news. There's been a data compromise here. I'm only ever losing one thing at a time, right? And so I never have to worry that if there's a data breach that is this systematic, my whole life is about to get turned upside down, because you essentially have different secure walls for every single thing. And there's no way to remember all the passwords that we all have anymore. I do think we're slowly but surely on our way to a passwordless future, but it is a pain. It is worth it. It makes life so much easier. But I really think a password manager is truly the key because otherwise there's just simply no way to have the strong passwords you need. So I really, really encourage that. If you have a PC, run antivirus software, set up account notifications. I always joke like I have the most redundant account notifications in the world, like especially if I use Apple Pay. I'll do Apple Pay and I get the notice on my phone. I get it in an email. I get it from Navy Federal, so not just the Apple Pay, but the Navy Federal's letting me know my credit card had this transaction, and sort of like imagine fireworks. Like every time I make a transaction, it's like, you did it. Very noticeable. And for me, even though I don't need that every time I'm spending money, I know that I'm going to notice if something isn't right. Another example I've totally had, I was like, I got one, it was like a $5 transaction. I was like, what is this? I don't even know what this is. Do I have an account compromised? I was ready to call in and like reset, get new credit card, all that. And then I looked a little bit longer at it and I realized what it was and I was able to move about my business. But that idea that like I almost always just am getting reminders about things I already knew were happening. And then you get that occasional, we get a ton of calls the day everybody's Prime membership renews. I have this charge from Amazon. I don't know what it is. I'm like, is it your Prime renewal? Like we already know. We all have things that are set up, automated subscriptions. Like that's the way commerce works these days. You're going to have something that you'll get a moment of pause. You don't know what it is, but it keeps you on top of your spending. So it's good for budget and general financial awareness, but you're going to get that. If something isn't you're going to get that notification. So I think having them notification set up can be very useful. Routine credit score monitoring, you can pay for that service. You can get your free annual credit report from the bureaus. You can do it that way. Making sure you unfreeze debit and credit cards. Like in my example of having my wallet stolen, as soon as I got a call that there was something wrong, freeze them all up. I'm also the queen of like, where did I set my wallet? And if I'm not sure where I set it for a second, I freeze everything, go find it, and then I unfreeze it. And again, not a sales pitch, we and every other financial institution make it really easy to do that because no one wants to lose money. I don't want you to lose your money. I don't want me to lose your money. We all want this to be secure. So being fast and loose with freezing whenever even if you're just like, I think it's in my car. And if you just need a minute before you can go out there, just freeze it, unfreeze it. It's so easy, but really taking advantage of that. Setting up travel alerts, that's kind of on the other side. That's for when you do want us to let your transactions go through, even though you're somewhere new that you aren't usually at. That's a great thing to set up so we don't put in rules that will stop you from getting done what you are legitimately trying to do. And then finally, this one seems really easy, but here's the thing about fraudsters. They are trying to steal your money all of the time in every way that they can think of. And they're going to the easiest way possible. I think since there's more work from home and things like that, I don't think neighborhoods are quite as quiet during the day as maybe they have been in the past. But make sure you shred documents with sensitive data, because if you just throw it all into your recycling bin on recycling day, it is not that hard for somebody to walk by and see if there's a big bunch of papers, pull it out, and get personal information that way. I am sure that in your community, wherever that may be, there are resources to shred things. I know sometimes we'll have Navy Shredder all days, so perhaps we have a local branch that's close to you where you could do it, your own workplace. My county government has one as well. Like there's lots of different people and entities that know that shredding is important. So keep that one in mind. It's still, I feel like that feels like an old fashioned reminder, but it still is, again, they're going to go with whatever way is easiest. We see a lot of check fraud. I was hoping that paper checks would be totally gone, and we still see check fraud at Navy Federal all the time. So these old fashioned things, we're going to keep coming up as soon as they're seen as a point of failure. It's always a possibility. So just be smart about that. And then last one, we didn't have a ton of time for it, but I just will say real fast for fraud. The next slide is fraud response. What do I do? Right? Something has happened. I've cleared a fraud. Freeze those cards, call your financial institution, double check the credit report to make sure there's not a bigger problem than what you had already just noticed. Put a fraud alert on your credit report. That sort of makes it so that if think about all of our financial institutions, they're tuning rules. And if you're putting that fraud alert on that you've recently had fraud, we're going to be a little bit tighter with our controls for a while to make sure there's nothing else associated with that. So that's inviting all of your financial services providers, maybe you have different credit cards places, credit unions, whatever. It's inviting all of us to look that much more closely at any transaction to make sure we've really fully understood the problem and gotten the bad actors out of your accounts. And then finally, file a police report. I know it can feel like it's not going to do anything, and it's true. I don't think most police stations have the bandwidth to actually go and research every single fraudulent transaction. But the more that we report it, we certainly report it on the Navy Federal side. again, as do all of your other financial institutions if you use them. We are obligated to report those, but lots of times the way that technology works these days, they're able to do lots of small things to add up to stealing a lot of money. But the more that we all report these things, those are all more clues that when they do start to uncover a ring, that investigators are going to be able to really follow those threads and help them with their investigation. So we every now and then get a really nice letter from the FBI or somebody else that's like, thank you, Navy Federal. You gave us all of these, we call them SARs, suspicious activity reports, but you filed all of these SARs. We absolutely use them. And here's the indictment we put forward, or here's the arrest, and here's what this person's sentenced to. So it can be hard because sometimes it does feel like, yelling into a void that there's a problem. But just know that everybody who does that is all part of creating a record of how big this problem is. It helps our government officials know that it's a big problem we need their help in addressing. And again, might be the piece of information that is part of an investigation that actually does lead to some justice. So something that's worth doing, even if it takes a little bit of time. But we're almost right at time, so I will stop talking.
Carrie, thank you so much for taking the time to really walk us through, what that looks like as far as understanding fraud, because I think if we understand fraud in our own personal lives and how it may impact us, the organizations serving our veterans, military and their families can recognize it and say, hey, that is weird that, you're telling me this is happening, or you've received a call from your long lost grandson, or, someone in your family or anything like that. So it's really important to be able to understand and recognize those. So really appreciate your time. I think we have time for one quick question. It was a really full webinar and you really covered everything. So very, very appreciative of that. One of our questions is regarding, financial exploitation, for caregivers, friends, things like that, who are those close trusted people who, may have daily access to you, especially in a caregiver setting. Is there anything in particular that banks can do to help in these cases? So I know sometimes those caregivers are fiduciaries, sometimes they are just available and have access. Is there something that banks can do to help, support that, or organizations can do in thinking about that?
Yeah. So again, I think this one can be a really complicated situation for people who have loved ones in their lives that are able to, that they trust and they're able to support.
Yeah.
I think making sure you have things set up in a way that, again, if it's notifications, maybe you have an elderly parent and they've got a caregiver who's with them, sort of day in, day out. You're the child, maybe you don't live in the same place as them. Are you getting notifications? Can you be put on accounts? What are you talking about? I think a lot of these things, the more open and honest that you can be before anything's a problem, the more likely you are to be able to safeguard things. I would also think about like, what is the amount of money? So say you're in a situation where there's somebody who really needs the support of a caregiver and they really don't have capacity themselves anymore. Invest the money. It can be expensive and that can be really tough, but like setting up the right legal and financial protection. So that's powers of attorney, and maybe it's a trust that's administered by somebody else. If you're maybe working with a client who's an older person who has a material amount of money but doesn't have that loved one that they can trust in their life, like that might be time for a financial institution to be the fiduciary, and you can set up trusts and things like that. So I think there's different tools that are the right fit for different situations. Again, like if it's just that your child who you trust just doesn't live with you, but could be given the notifications or the access, they could do those things to make sure that they're really supporting you, even if they can't be there day in and day out. Or maybe it needs to be something that's a little bit more enduring because there isn't that trusted party and there does need to be more control. But how is money that doesn't need to be accessed by the caregiver not part of what they have access to? You could set up something, for example, where, hey, if my loved one is already in a nursing facility, like they don't need it. How much money do they independently need access to? Or maybe their rent is going to be paid, or some other, where you can keep the access limited so that the damage can be controlled, and that, hey, your investments, like your caregiver probably doesn't need any access to your investments. Now, maybe they might need to support the day-to-day checking account money to help with buying groceries or something like that, but separating your money, doing all these different things to make sure it's set up in a way that is helpful. We do, and again, everything we do, I think lots of other great financial institutions do as well. But we have elder abuse specific things. We have protocols that we follow. So those SARs often also have a financial elder financial abuse component where we have special resources that are available. We absolutely will reach out to somebody in your community, elder services. If for us, a lot of times it's somebody who's a regular at a branch. They know
Yeah.
them. They see this person every week or every other week, and then something starts to be not quite right. Those are going to be situations where we're going to reach out and we're going to try to do as much as we possibly can. But I would say within your family or your friend group, right? Whoever those loved ones are in your life, like figure out what it is, like where the vulnerability is, and think about it while people have capacity, what will make sense. I know it can be hard to talk about money, but talking about it a little bit can go a long way to preserving it.
Absolutely. Well, Carrie, I can't thank you enough for joining us and taking the time to walk us all through, some of these common scams and frauds. So I know I learned a couple of things. I'm sure others did as well, and really appreciate the time of everybody attending as well. So in the coming weeks, we will send out a link with the recording. And I encourage you guys to share this with any organizations or individual veterans that you guys are working with on a daily basis. So hopefully these are giving you the tools and access and resources that you have to be able to help protect your veterans a little bit better from fraud and scams. And I hope you all have a wonderful rest of the day. Thank you so much. Bye, Carrie.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
You.